What to do, what to do. This is the Brothers on Books podcast where we find great books that will give you real value and actionable steps and have fun in the process. Please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendation, or if you would like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to would be greatly appreciated. Lastly, if you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. If it's a dark and stormy night and you need a drink to warm the depths of your heart, we at the Brothers on Books go with Ensha Matcha, the best matcha for the best brothers. And now our listeners will get 10% off when they use the link in the show notes or the code provided at checkout. I'm Alex Allweil, and with me as always is my brother Jack Allweil. Jack, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Al. Any night where we get to discuss a book is a great night.
That's right. And we got the returning, goat of Brothers on Books podcasts, guest, godmother Sharon. Sharon, how are you? Thanks for coming.
I'm fine, thank you.
Always a pleasure to have you. It's always great discussing with you. You seem to be our number one fan. So with that said, Jack, what book are we doing?
Today we are reading Adam Grant's Hidden Potential, The Science of Achieving Greater Things. And I picked this in the book draft. I had actually kind of pre-read probably the first 30 pages at a Barnes & Noble. And I liked reading about the people that struggled with learning languages most of their lives and then kind of acquired different languages later in life. And that kind of piqued my interest, and I figured I picked it for the book draft.
Is that some projection there, Jack?
Yeah.
Okay. At least you're honest.
I actually, after starting to read this, I signed up for a German tutor. So I've been having an online German teacher like once a week. So that's been quite helpful.
Well, that's interesting. That's good.
And it's very uncomfortable because exactly what this book describes. Sometimes your most comfortable learning style is not really the most effective. And I'm getting another crash course in that.
Well, good for you. Yeah, I thought that was interesting too, the part where you have to push yourself to do something different, something that you're afraid of. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, because I think I would say my learning style, I definitely enjoy listening to podcasts, but when I started thinking about it, I definitely learned better by reading and then like writing and like actually doing math problems. Because I listen to like a lot of money things, but I don't really feel like I fully understand until I'm like writing it down or in Excel, like actually looking at numbers or doing math problems on it. So I thought that was interesting.
So this way you're using audio to learn.
Yeah, but it's not really that effective for me, it seems.
Now with your German?
Well, for German, like actually talking has been helpful, but it's very uncomfortable for me. And I feel like I'm like really fumbling through, and I am.
Okay.
So
and that's good according to Mr. Grant, Adam. That's good that you're fumbling through it, and then you can push yourself further, and the mistakes you're making, you will learn how to change that.
Yeah.
So before we get too far into this conversation, do you want to maybe give a breakdown of like generally what you're talking about so people understand?
Sure. So Hidden Potential, this book was broken down into 3 parts. The first part explores the specific character skills that catapult us to greater heights. The second section is about creating structures to sustain motivation. And the third part is building systems to expand opportunity. So that's what the book is about. I don't know where we want to start.
Well, I was thinking, I thought where you were starting was a great place, just the discomfort, but just generally what his point was about discomfort. Because I felt like we were just kind of talking about it, but not really explaining it.
Basically, a lot of times the most uncomfortable method of learning is probably the one you should be doing the most because it actually helps you learn the material or solidify it in your mind. Um, I don't know. Do
So
you have
in
anything?
regards, well, I guess just generally speaking, in regards to language, I thought his point was that the reason so many people struggle with it is because people are uncomfortable looking stupid when they speak. Like
Hmm.
inherently, when you're going to be learning a language, you have to. My takeaway for that was when you're going to learn a language, you have to go and speak the language, and
Hmm.
you'll inevitably look ridiculous trying to speak a new language. And people are afraid of looking sort of silly, so they don't do it, which is why so many people struggle. And I feel like what he was pointing out was the people that were like those polyglots in the book had no like shame almost. They just would like relentlessly go to these new countries and just speak, try and speak the language with the locals, all the time.
But
And
they had to that at the beginning they felt they were afraid of people laughing at them or telling them that they didn't do it right. But then as they got more comfortable doing it, then and then talking to people who spoke their language, then they started to feel more comfortable. But that was when he was pointing out to do things that make you uncomfortable.
Hmm. And he also talked about changing your expectation to just expecting to be bad, and the whole idea to like maybe set the goal to make more errors than people are even making attempts. So I think a lot of the polyglots were saying like their goal is to make at least 200 errors a day. And that's kind of the goal because and that kind of reframes it like I'm not expecting to be good. I'm just shooting to make errors, and that'll help me correct in my mind and actually learn going forward.
I think he puts out that diagram about being a perfectionist and how, uh, yeah,
What page is that?
let me see if I can, it's in this, yeah, the perfectionism spiral, it's page 68, where how if like if you're okay making mistakes, you'll get like more feedback. It's like a feedback loop, so you can hone your skills better. Versus if you're a perfectionist, if you try something new, you make a mistake, it deters you from doing it. So you won't then try it again.
Mhm.
So like your level of comfort of like what you're willing to do, if you like consider yourself a perfectionist, will constantly narrow versus if you're okay making mistakes, like you constantly become better at all these different things. In this perfectionism spiral, like so that's the opposite of just constantly getting feedback to hone like what it is you're doing. I feel like that is a concept that we have talked about a lot. Going back, the first time I remember talking about it was actually in episode 2, the 50th law. I remember 50 Cent writing about this or talking about this in his book, where he was saying he just wanted to put out a mixtape as quickly as possible or a song to get feedback. And then if people liked it or they didn't like it, he would then rehash it and then go again. Um, just sort of an interesting point, I guess.
And then I like the part where he said, when you're looking for feedback, don't talk to people that you know are going to tell you how great you're doing. Talk to people who are going to tell you the mistakes you made so that you can see what you can do to correct it.
And also, actually, one thing that he talked about, maybe this was the second part or the third part, but he was saying actually the feedback isn't as beneficial as getting like advice. And he was saying like feedback is kind of like your past stuff, advice is more forward looking. And yeah, how you can actually go forward.
Yeah, I took that as you should ask for what you can do better versus like how did I do?
Right.
Okay,
Like so you
yeah.
can you can
Mhm.
hone in on it. To me, it seemed like it was just a framing issue. Like if you frame it as like what can I do better, the the responses will be more geared towards telling you like how you can actually like what you need to improve on versus if
Mhm.
you ask for feedback, it's going to be very generic. Yeah, it was good. Like I like the talk type of comments that I don't know if you've ever given a presentation and you've gotten feedback. That's something I feel like I've gotten before. I don't know, Sharon, like I guess you taught kindergarten, but when you were a teacher, did you ever have that? Like, did you get, I'm
Well,
assuming
see,
you,
yeah, when you're a teacher, they'll come in, supervisors will come in and they'll tell you, they'll look at what you're doing and then they'll talk to you about it. And they're not there just to give you compliments, or they're there to tell you this is what you did and you could do this instead, or you could do this along with that. So that was part of a very important part of when you were teaching.
'cause I was thinking back to when he talked about giving a lecture, and I remember when I would go do my course evaluations, if I even took the time to fill them out, it would always be a generic, yeah, I like the course, yeah, I didn't like the course, but I didn't really care. But if someone would have asked me like what I thought could be improved or what they thought I could do better, yeah, I think I would have actually put more effort into giving a
So,
well thought out answer.
mhm, that's true. It just, and as you said, it's reframing how you've been thinking about things all this time. Like you, it's not necessarily something you think about, that it's good when people are telling you what you should do. Well, it is good, but you don't feel as comfortable with it as when people say, oh, you did such a good job and I really liked it and all that. So this is a good way to reframe it so that it helps you to grow. And then another thing, which has nothing to do with that, but later on in the book, I was really interested in the fact that he said that brainstorming is not really good because all these people are there and they're saying things. It's better to just talk like one-on-one or two-on-one. And because every meeting you go to or everything you do, people say, okay, let's brainstorm. And then everyone comes up with different ideas what we can do. And that doesn't really solve the problem. It doesn't really make people feel like we're going to be doing something that will help us be better. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, the brainstorming thing, he brought up a couple different ideas. Like if the boss is there, a lot of people just go along with the boss.
Right.
And then also people are, if they're like low on the totem pole, they're kind of scared
Right.
to look stupid
Right.
or so I really like, I think he called it brain
Writing.
writing,
Yeah.
where you go individually, write down the ideas that solve the problem, and then they anonymously like group all the ideas together, and then they read and kind of pick out the best ones collectively. I did like that idea. I was thinking about how I could utilize that for like, I don't know, making decisions with like rental properties or something. Because there are some times where I'm like, yeah, guys, like let's just like brainstorm. Like I'm open to anything, but I guess maybe that's not the best way to do it. I don't know.
Well, Alex, does that happen to you at work, that you have meetings at work?
Yeah. So, I mean, what people not speaking up is definitely a constant problem. Uh, I feel like we actually often, the problem I felt like he was really touching on was that someone, that's not necessarily like the word the biggest ego, but usually I feel in those types of situations, there's going to be someone with like a very dominant personality, and they kind of control the entire
Mhm.
conversation. So I thought the main benefit of the brain writing was that instead of, and I don't know, like in class projects, I feel like you've seen this. And Jack, have you ever played the game Pandemic?
No, I have not.
Okay, so it's a cooperative game. I feel like that is I feel like when you have those type of cooperation things, it always kind of coalesces into like one or two people that are just very outgoing, kind of controlling everything. So I kind of thought the one of the big problems with brainstorming is that all the communication centers around a couple people and you lose out on like everyone else's ideas because it's being dominated by a couple people. So in this other form where everyone individually writes it down, you get the use of everyone's knowledge, which I thought was the real benefit.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And then the game, I guess you've never played it, but it's a cooperative game. And I feel like every time I play it, I hate it because there would always be like one person that essentially would be playing for every single person. And I'm like, man, like, why are we even doing this? This sucks. Like,
I think what you're describing is how I feel when I go to an escape room. Actually, Sharon, have you ever been to an escape room?
No, I've heard about them, but no.
So they like you're supposed to like find clues. Like you're trapped in this room, and a lot of them have themes, like you're on an airplane or in a mine or something. But they give you clues to get to the next step to find a key or something to unlock some door. But basically, you want to get out of the room. And I always feel like whenever I'm in one of those, there's someone, yeah, that dominates the whole thing. I'm like, I can't even like hear myself think. Like,
Right. And then
um,
they don't necessarily take responsibility when something said is wrong.
so, so yeah. I mean, I don't know if anyone has like specific things from part one. A couple things I noted down, and I'd be curious on Sharon's view on this too. How they brought up these attributes. This is page 9, but they talked about these character traits. They're proactive, pro-social, disciplined, and determined. And they said when the teachers graded students high on these characteristics, it proved more predictive than like math and reading skills early on. And I thought that was like super interesting. Because basically he's saying it's more important to it's more important to get better at the characters like building than like better at technical skills
Mhm.
or cognitive skills.
That's
yeah,
like
so
getting better at getting better, that chapter, part one.
Mhm.
I felt like that was like almost touching on the fact that it's better to be able to. I took that as it's like better to be able to interact with people than necessarily have like deep technical knowledge of any one thing, right?
And
Or
and use team playing, teamwork, work together on things. That's not just be out there by yourself.
Mhm.
right, because I don't remember who was it. One of those was it like Carnegie or Ford who said like the most important like skill is like being able to manage humans. I don't remember the exact
I,
quote.
I think it was Ford. Didn't he have like strings where he could like, oh, I don't know the answer to this, but I know who to call for this.
Well, there's that story where, Ford, I think Ford was on the stand and they were asking him all these questions and he didn't know any of it. And someone was like, "How can you not know this?" And he goes, let me get my secretary." And he just tells her, go find all this out. And then she brings him all the answers or something along those lines. Where the point is not necessarily having the, technical
Answer.
knowledge, but being able to get it.
And I also thought I was thinking to like this is why sports are so good because they teach you a lot of there's the argument like do sports like actually teach you it or do they kind of reveal those characteristics? But it feels like from this reading the character skills can be built upon. So that would be, an argument for playing sports because sports do, especially team sports, help you, learn how to deal with like different types of personalities, for sure, and cooperate.
He had those statistics about people that tested high on narcissism and like how their teams fared. I thought that was like how the team did if the point guard scored high on like being a
Yeah.
narcissist. I
Yep.
thought that was wild. Uh,
Yep. For sure.
And then the
uh,
part where if you were on a team and then somebody got hurt, and then
Yep.
they had to readjust what they were doing without him. And then when the person came back, when the man came back or the woman, then they had changed the way they were playing because they had been missing him, and it improved the game altogether even when the man came back.
Absolutely. Yeah. I guess another kind of another quote I wrote down that made me think of sports was, and I'm curious what you guys think when you hear this. So when people can't see a path, they stop dreaming of the destination.
That makes sense.
So I was so I used to read a ton of soccer books, and this quote made me think of, so there's a team in the Netherlands called Ajax. They're very well known. Historically, they were very dominant. And they structured their academy the same way as the pro team. So like even like the 10-year-olds, the 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, they all played the same formation, 4-3-3, and the fields were like in order. So like the kids, even when they're little youngsters, like you could see like, okay, this is where like the U12s play. If you're still good enough, like you'll play on this field as a 13-year-old, and then like, you keep moving up. And then eventually the field at the furthest end is where the pros are playing. So it's like the kids could literally see the path forward, and that helped them like envision themselves like making it. Whereas I feel like a lot of people in other systems kind of get lost because they don't really they can't see the path.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I think he was kind of getting into like sometimes like for people from poor socioeconomic classes, they don't have certain role models for certain professions, so then they have a hard time seeing the path forward to that profession.
Mhm.
And then it's kind of hard to envision yourself getting there.
But I wonder, in that, when you're talking about the team and the children are learning what the goal is, what happens when you are not quite good enough to go that far? I mean, but you're still playing, but you can't really see yourself doing that. Are you saying that because they have something at the end that they know they're going for, then that would stop them from losing the confidence? I mean, yeah.
I think it just helps them see like the path forward. Like, because I feel like at least in America,
Mm-hmm.
from what I can tell, we were not really exposed to this like European style of soccer. It wasn't as like dog eat dog. And after high school, it's kind of like a mishmash. And I guess people just think to go to college, but like outside of the US, nobody does that. And I feel like some people get lost kind of in the system. Like I feel like if there was a system in place, they might stick with it longer and they might see a path forward. I'm not.
Yeah,
I just thought that the Ajax example, and I think Barcelona, I think a lot of the clubs do this now, basically, where the youngsters can see where the pros practice. And it just helps them envision themselves and visualize themselves getting there.
okay, yeah, I see that now. Mm-hmm.
But
I guess from just still the first part, skills of character, I thought the points on just absorbing and adapting, like he says, be a human sponge. I thought this section was, I mean,
Yeah, I like
to
that
to
part about
me,
the human sponge. Yeah.
yeah, to me it seemed like just like knowing who you should be listening to, what type of advice, like whose advice you should be taking, if you know them, versus are they an expert in their field? Like if someone's not an expert and they're criticizing you on something, you shouldn't probably like take it too harshly. If someone, however, knows and cares about you and they are an expert and they're giving you criticism, you should be heeding what they're saying. Um, just ways of like filtering out who you listen to, I think is important. Uh, he makes a point in here, which was almost, I think, sort of getting ahead of it, but in one of the education chapter, I think it was in the education section, but when he was talking about like maybe why experts aren't the best teachers, he made a compare or made a point about Albert Einstein, like why Albert Einstein wasn't like a great physics teacher because like it was like so hard for him to understand like what a first year physics student would know. And when I was reading that, I remember thinking back to like when I was in grad school, my like mentor saying something like to me about like how I should know all this stuff. And I'd be like, man, like there's no way I should know all this. And then like sure enough, like 4 months later in class, we like started covering like what he was saying. And I'm like, yeah, I just sort of remember thinking like, I feel like you've lost touch with what like a first year graduate student knows just because you've become like such an expert. Like you just don't realize what first year students know. Um, which is like weird because I feel like they teach it all the time, but it's maybe I don't know. I just kind of got that from a lot of the older professors. Like they lost touch with the incoming students, like where
Mhm.
they were knowledge base wise.
Yeah, I think he made a case that like kind of there should be different tiers of professors and that maybe the best professors should be saved later on in the development because they're really not the best at teaching those entry level classes.
Well,
Not
not that's best professor, most expert, I would say.
yeah, most expert. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think I sorry to keep bring this back to sports, but I think this is also a reason why oftentimes the best players don't make the best coaches because the best players have trouble relating to people that just can't do what they were able to do.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Especially if you don't do it a lot. Like, I mean, I remember when I was going out, I feel like I coach a decent amount, but I mean, in pickleball, I used to have this like idea in my mind that I could make anyone like a 4-0 player. And for those of people that don't know what a 4-0 player, that's like relatively, it's like not a beginner, but it's not like an expert. It's like kind of an intermediate player. I kind of thought I could make anyone be that level within like 3 to 4 months if they really wanted it. And then I remember, no offense to her, but I remember I took mom out and I'm like, yeah, I don't think I could make mom a 4-0 player. I mean, maybe if we like really worked at it, but it would be hard. But like just describing mechanics of your body is like an interesting concept that
I'm sorry,
I,
what you say, the concept of what? Bravado?
no, like describing like mechanics of things,
Oh,
like
uh-huh.
like describing like mechanically how you do something, like like a stroke or like Jack, if you were to go describe how to dribble to someone, like in your mind you can envision it really well. But if you had to verbalize it, it would be difficult. But if you had to show someone it, it's easy,
mhm. Yeah, I think there
right?
was a good example in the book because the author was a pretty good
A
diver, it
diver,
sounded like.
right?
And he was watching some guy dive, and I think the guy did like a quadruple like flip and or some sort of spin. And he asked him like how to do it, and the guy just like spin fast. I think it was his response or
Right.
something.
Yeah.
It's
Like,
not very
just do
helpful.
it.
Yeah, just do it. I
Okay,
mean,
yes.
But like
so
I found myself saying that before. Uh like when people are like ask me how I hit shots, I'm like, yo, you just I don't know, you just you swing your arm and you hit the ball. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
just flick the wrist, right, Al?
Flick the wrist, right? Just flick the wrist. Flick the wrist more, flick the wrist less. That's all you have to do. Mm.
So he Adam brought up a lot of things that you don't really think about. Basically, you don't think about. You don't think about the fact that you should try something even if you're afraid to. You don't think about the fact that maybe hearing everybody's opinion is not a good idea. So it lets you look at things a different way.
And I think as we get older, we don't like in school, like you're kind of forced to do the things you don't like to do.
Mhm.
Like, you know, if you don't like giving oral reports, like, well, tough luck. I mean,
You
you
gotta
gotta keep
do it,
doing it.
right?
But after you're out of school, like no one's there forcing you to do it. So you kind of have to force yourself to put yourself in those positions
Right. Mhm.
to feel that way. And that's kind of the tough thing because no one's forcing you to do it.
Right, and
Yeah.
knowing that because you don't feel confident of yourself enough that you're going to go out there and not do the best job that you could do, that you end up being able to do later on.
So it's sort of interesting that this coincided with this, but last week I listened to like an hour and a half YouTube video on how comfort is destroying like America's youth. And it was essentially for that reason. And like when you started talking, it's like, yeah, what you just said, Jack, like people don't have to do anything hard because like we have such abundance now. It's like nothing's really hard. You don't really have to work for a whole lot. You can essentially do whatever you want to do. Uh, yeah, you're never forced to be in these uncomfortable situations. And if you really don't push yourself, you essentially could never have to be.
Mhm.
Um,
And then when we read I think it was The Coddling of the American Mind, they talked about how there are these, I don't know if you've heard about this, Sharon, but these like safe spaces in schools now. So if someone
Uh-huh.
starts feeling like under attack or uncomfortable, they could go to
Into
this
a
safe
safe space,
space.
yeah. Yeah.
So that is like the opposite of what we actually want to be doing.
Mhm. People don't even know that they want to be doing that they need to push themselves, they need to try something, even if it's scary for them.
Mhm.
So,
so yeah, I mean, I felt like that was so the next section, I don't know, I felt like that was pretty good for that section.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of scary things, I mean, I wrote down at the beginning of part two, so we're now moving into structures for motivation. This idea of playing Tetris after seeing unsettling imagery can somehow help with like those images. I never heard anything like this. But apparently if you see something bad and you then go play Tetris, the after effects won't be as intense.
yeah, it was interesting. And I think, and I guess it's just a certain kind of a game that you have to play. Like you can't just go, I don't know, a game that you have to use your mind or something. This one you have to use you have to figure out how to put things in a different certain spots,
Mhm.
right? Isn't that what
Yeah,
Tetris
yeah, I
is?
think
I
it's
looked it
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
up.
like the visual aspect and the
Right.
contorting of objects.
And I guess what you just brought up about the visual, I guess because it helps take the visual that you saw that's made you feel uncomfortable and scared, and instead you have the visual of the Tetris game.
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing that was wild to me about that was like who thought to actually study that?
Right.
Like how did they come
Such
up
a
with that
such a
that
random
study?
thing.
It's like, okay.
I bet he was a Tetris fan that wanted to prove that this was a great thing.
Right, that's true. Or maybe it was the man that invented it.
The Tetris
And then
lobby.
it's like I think this is sort of what we're talking about. But I like the part with Steve Martin, how he was afraid to
Ah,
write his own jokes. He was just um, I forget what they said he was, but anyways, he was afraid to write his own jokes, and so he decided that he was going to try it, and he had a lot hard time doing it because it was really fearful to him.
I think the part of the Steve Martin
I
aspect
was
was he was doing it like off the cuff a lot in the beginning and
Mm-hmm.
he never like
Yeah.
wrote it down. And I think by writing down, he got rid of a lot of the filler words and the fluff and then was able to practice more, just better preparation.
Yeah.
Um, but once again, that goes to like he was uncomfortable doing like the writing aspect, and that ended up being the best way to actually learn the craft.
And I think
Um,
somebody had told him that his jokes they weren't doing well, or his writing wasn't doing well. He wasn't doing a good job of presenting it. And so that's what made him feel, oh, somebody suggested that he should start writing it, right? Yeah.
I think, yeah.
And so then again, that was somebody giving you advice, somebody telling you something to look for in the future, and not saying, oh, well, you did a good job in the past, or that was good what you just did. So it's again looking for, like again with the soccer team. I think that's what you meant. I think it was a soccer team you're talking about, right? In Holland.
Holland, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So I felt like the main, this is part two, like one of the main takeaways for me was like transforming this daily grind, the first chapter is just like if you're practicing something, like how important it is to make it enjoyable. And I feel like you kind of hear about this, like this term burnout a lot, burnout, and then he brought up the term bore out. And I feel like you kind of see this with some like over demanding parents and how they drive their kids like just, so hard into just like monotonously practicing. And he was kind of saying it's like it's important to make the practice fun. Like, so the stuff I sort of what you were talking about at the beginning with, you're competing against yourself, like you can kind of make it into a game. It's like, oh, like this month I'm going to sell like, or I'm going to buy 5 parcels of land, but last month I bought 4 parcels of land. And then next month you're going to try, you're going to just try and beat yourself from this month and buy, 6 parcels of land. So he brings up this example of, Steph Curry. He was like, he was going to try and make 21 points in a
A
minute.
minute, yeah.
Right. And then, the next day he's going to try and make 22 points. So it's just like always trying to structure it so it's like you against like past you. So the thing that you're measuring is progress, not necessarily winning. Because like winning, you're not really ever in charge of winning. Like you're only in control of like how you can play. Uh, and I feel like I used to bring this point up a lot to people in sports, and people didn't really ever, it didn't seem like that drastic of a concept, but I think it's important to realize that all you can really strive to do is go out and play, play as hard as you can. But the fact whether you win or lose, it's not really dependent on you because at the end of the day, you could be playing the best player in the world or someone that's just better than you. So that's the point is to measure like how you're progressing, not necessarily like wins and losses.
Yeah,
And to make
also,
the practice fun. I feel like I was kind of rambling there, but
no, but I remember I was thinking a lot back to when we were young, like playing soccer, and there were a couple of teams where we had very good teams, but this was like, these were like rec leagues, we're like 9, 10 years old. And I remember teammates of mine saying, like, what do we like? I think the coach would say, like, yeah, I'll see you at practice. And then like a kid would say, what do we need to practice for? We're like winning all the time. And then, coach would be like, well, there's a kid in Brazil playing like 9 hours a day, so you better practice a little more. Something to that effect. But yeah, totally. I like the idea of making games out of things and switching from like I have to I want to do something and finding ways to want to do something.
just intrinsically makes it easier. Like if you start feeling like, you have to go do something, it kind of just, at least for me, in the back of my mind, makes me not want to do it. But when I feel like I get to go do something, then I get like super excited. And I'm excited to go do it. And then I try hard and I do it well and I feel good about myself. But if I have to do something, I feel like it's a drag and I don't want to be there.
And don't you have different goals for yourself when somebody's making you do it, rather than you're doing it because you're looking forward to it? Something it's enjoyable. When you do something because it's enjoyable, you're breaking it up with fun things. You are it's easier to judge yourself, judge how, if you're doing the best you can do. But when somebody says to you, oh, you have to go play that game right now, then you feel like you have to do something. You have to win for that particular person. Doesn't matter how you're feeling. No.
No, no,
Shannon?
I think that there is something to that because, like, even if it's something that you normally like, if you then don't feel like you're in control, you end up not liking it as much.
Right.
Whereas, like, even if there's something that you wouldn't normally do, if it's kind of on your terms, you could potentially end up liking it more than the thing you were more skilled at, but working under someone else or on someone
Right.
else's clock or under their parameters. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking a lot of actually I this German teacher I've been using, she has been giving me these like fun exercises, and they have been fun. Like, she'll give me like a song to look up, and it has like blanks in the lyrics, and I'll have to like go and listen to it and like try to figure out what word it is, and then like I gotta translate it, and it does make it kind of fun. It like breaks up the monotony of just like memorizing verbs or
Yeah, that's true.
so yeah, I've kind of been like, yeah, like making it, yeah, play. Um, so anything else on?
Yeah, I mean the other part for the structure or motivation that I thought was important was this concept that like sometimes you need to go back, like you need to change things in order to get better. And he brings up the example of this picture. I think his name was R.A. Stuckey or something.
Dickey,
Right. The
Dickey,
guy
R.A. Dickey.
who would like throw this knuckleball, but and like the point was like he was a pitcher and he realized he wasn't going to be able to like throw 100-mile-an-hour fastballs, so he had to change and he had to adapt. And he started throwing these knuckleballs. And I kind of like I really I kind of resonated with that quite a bit. I had when I started playing pickleball, I had a very extreme grip. And I remember after I played for about a year and probably closer to 2 years, I realized I was never going to be able to play really any higher than I was. So I changed my grip, and that was like 2 years ago. And I'm definitely a lot better now than I was then. But it was sort of like the same thing. In the beginning, it was very uncomfortable. It felt weird to hit the ball again. It like felt like I was a beginner again. And for like 3 or 4 months, I felt like I was kind of terrible
Hmm.
until
How
I
did you
could.
even know to loosen your grip?
Yeah.
It was how I was holding the paddle. I was essentially
Oh,
I was like holding the face of the paddle. Like
so
I
you're
was
holding it too
holding.
high?
Right. So like I
Okay.
couldn't, so you like I was locking my wrist.
Hmm.
So all of those, flick your wrists, I couldn't do
Mm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you figure out how to change what you needed to change? You just
Well,
look.
I essentially watched everyone else who was good.
Oh.
There was only there were two people that in the top at the time in the top probably 40 players, there were two people that held their paddle like me, and they were going the way of the dodo very quickly. Uh, they were becoming very somewhat irrelevant, and I kind of realized that I too, I mean, I am still irrelevant, but I would be more irrelevant if I didn't change. So
Yeah.
that's what I did, yeah. And
I mean,
even now, I'm thinking I feel like I now need a two-handed backhand, and I've started doing that, and it's yet again very uncomfortable. But I think in the end, it will be better.
Is
yeah,
it just, is that the same thing as when he said you should just start all over again, like from the beginning? Is that the same thing?
It's
kind
not
of.
necessarily starting from the beginning, but it's just like you have to, there are some skills that can only take you so far, and you have to just kind of get rid of them and figure other things out. Um,
kind of have to backtrack a little bit. Sometimes you
Right.
have to go back to go forward, kind of.
Mhm,
Like
mhm.
initially when you go backwards, like yeah, you're worse. You get worse than what you were before, but then you build the new skills you build up and you're able to become better.
I mean,
Yeah,
R.A. Dickey, I looked him up. I can't remember if this was in the book or something I looked up. I mean, you should look up his knuckleball if you can on YouTube. It is a bizarre looking pitch. Um, but he spent like 7 years, I think, in the minors.
Minors, yeah.
And then eventually he did make it back up to the majors
What
and he did get the Cy Young
Cy
award, which
Young,
is like the
right.
top
yeah,
Yes,
award.
sir.
but
He
remember,
was
first he was in the minors, and then they brought him up, and then he
Hmm.
did so poorly that they
Yeah,
had to send him back to the minors
right.
again.
right, but
Yep.
Sharon, that's the whole point. Like he
Right,
kept kind of getting up, but never being able to stay. So he kept
right,
having to adjust
right.
what he was doing.
And then there was another interesting thing about R.A. Dickey. R.A. Dickey seems like quite the character, but he decided to hike Mount Kilimanjaro. And I think whatever team he was on had him sign a waiver basically saying if he got
So
hurt on this hike, he was forfeiting his wages for the year. But
he did it anyway.
he hiked Mount Kilimanjaro and then had a great season. And he was I guess the point of that story was that you should stay balanced and that like if you see progress in another part of your life, it might trickle over into well like your main job, I suppose. It
You
it
think
was it
so?
was it was advocating for hobbies and like side gigs. And I think
Oh,
I would echo that because I remember I failed the sixth actuarial exam. I remember for after the third time, I felt like my life was getting out of balance, and that's when I started training for that first half marathon. And when I was actually like able to see progress in like something else other than I got a little more confidence, and then I just felt overall better. And I ended up passing that next attempt. So I I'm
that's
also advocate for side gigs and hobbies.
I think that's when he brings up the concept of like languishing, where like you're focused so hard and you're just like stuck on something. You just
Hmm.
need a I feel like you just need a break from it,
Yeah.
right? And then sort of like what you were saying, you can do something else, you see positive growth in that, and then that will then trickle back into your original goal.
mhm. So did this book help you? I mean, you read so many of these different books, but did this help you? You too? Think
Yeah.
about the things
I,
that you do and how you can change it, or what you're doing wrong, or what you've been doing right. Does that change you or anything?
the discomfort sections, actually, well, what I just talked about on like feeling, discomfort and feeling like you're taking a step back when you're trying to build a new skill
Hmm.
and knowing that, you know, one of my, I would say one of like, if I could distill like one of my takeaways from this book down, it would be like discomfort is like the key to growth. Like making yourself uncomfortable is like how you grow as a human, uh, whether in sports or just in life. And like coupled with sort of what I was just talking about in training, yeah, I definitely thought a lot about how I practice and just my social life as a whole and kind of what I can take from this.
Yeah.
I kind of like the message too. Like if you're at a point where you're getting like frustrated, perhaps look back to when you started or even before you started and kind of try to visualize where you are now and kind of see that you have made a lot of progress and not to be so hard on yourself.
That's true.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting book because to me it brought up things that I never even would have thought of.
mhm.
So I don't know, because you two have read so many different kinds of books like this, it might not have been as much of a change change agent as it was for me.
Mhm.
Well, I guess, Sharon, it would be interesting to hear your takes as a, as an educator. The third section was a lot about education. What were
Mhm.
your thoughts on some of these concepts that they were bringing up, mainly from Finland?
Well, it was interesting because well, I know that there's so many different ways that people learn, that children learn, and and then I got to the part that he said that those were all those, if you're doing all those different things for people, for the kids, and to go along with what the best way that they learn, that's what I don't get. So then he said, change it, or do something different, or what did he say to that?
Sorry, say that again.
That there's different, every kid learns in a different way, and so you try to have your teaching go to each child as much as possible to the way they learn, right? Are they visual learners, are they audio learners, do they have to touch things? And I got the impression he said that that was not necessarily the way to look at how you teach it, to just going to their particular goals. The
Well,
way, I mean,
he
I
said
thought,
in the beginning that the learning styles is a total myth, and
Math,
that,
yeah.
that there's a total lack of evidence for this theory that certain people have different learning styles. That was at least the beginning part.
so then maybe it goes along with, if you have to learn in a different way that you're not used to learning, that's helping you to grow. If I'm which I am, a visual person, but if I have to be taught, I have to do something audio hearing, okay, that I have to change the way that I'm concentrating, change the way that I am learning about something, so that I can learn it. That's my opinion. Does that make sense to you too? No.
Yeah, I mean,
No.
the whole system of learning things, I felt like, yeah, he said it was a myth, and I don't remember what book we read, Jack, but I felt like we had the hierarchy of like retention of knowledge, where it was like listening, like at the lowest point, it was like listening about it, talking about it, and then it was like reading about it, writing about it, and then like you get the highest retention when you actually do it. And I like the way that was described to me was, I felt like that was consistent amongst all humans. That's like how humans just as a whole retain knowledge. And that kind of agreed with what he was saying, that this whole different styles of learning is like a myth. I don't really know, but what I thought he was saying was like that if you're not, just because you're not comfortable with something, it may still be the best way to learn that, like that specific topic. So even if you're not comfortable with it, that's what you should be doing. Like if you were going to learn, I guess I'll just use, if you were going to learn how to change your oil in a car, like you could read 1,000 books about changing oil on a car, but the best way to learn it would be actually to physically go change your oil, right?
Mhm. Or somebody
And
could tell you how to do it, and it still is not going to help you necessarily when you go and look at it. So even if they were talking to you and you were a person that learned things through your different senses, then it's still, whether you're learning just by reading it or you're learning it by listening to somebody, going and doing it is really the way to do it. So that goes on what you're saying, which is it doesn't matter what kind of a learner you are. The point is you have to go to all these steps and still end up talking to looking at the engine, looking at whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Mhm. I mean, they also bring up how, like, just if you're told you have to teach this, that enhances your learning because you're like preparing to like try to teach it to someone. And that's kind of how I feel about this podcast. I feel like this podcast kind of helps me learn the material because I'm having to talk about it. And normally I would just read a book and it would just stay in my head and I wouldn't really have to talk about it. And he said the
sure.
same thing with coaching. Like if you want to enhance your courage, you should start coaching because you giving advice somehow. I can't remember if there was I mean, I think there was a couple studies on that he brought up, but that will enhance your level of courage by giving advice and coaching.
Mhm, mhm.
But I guess the thing with I don't know, going back to the Finland was scoring like the top in a lot of these
Yes,
country
right.
scores.
Uh-huh.
Some of the things they were doing are interesting. I don't, I think they were calling it looping, where you have like the same teacher year after year.
Right,
And I think they said it was up sometimes 6 years, you might have the same teacher.
right. And then
Um,
they also had, during their lesson, they also had a lot of time to play. They'd have a lot of
mhm,
recesses to that because they thought that was important too. But I forget the reason why that was. It just that they were doing it so well for so long that they never made any changes. Because remember, then he said that they started to not be the top. They went to
mhm.
like second or third or whatever. And so that's maybe the point of that was that they needed to change how they were doing things because they were doing it the same way all the time. And obviously it wasn't working as well as it had started to work.
Well, no,
Well, I
I
think
don't.
that, go ahead, Al.
I was just going to say it's not that it wasn't working. It was that other countries had exported what they were doing. So other countries were essentially catching up. So I took it as a sign as like what Finland was doing was working because the other countries that were doing it were using essentially the Finnish model.
Mhm. Yeah, they said
Uh,
it was replicated in Estonia, and then they said there were independent studies in North Carolina, of all places, in Indiana, and the test scores did pop when I think when they did it in the States, it was just like 2 consecutive years of having the same teacher.
right.
So that's pretty interesting. I was actually thinking back, I could think of a couple times where I had the same teacher like back to back years. And they were in math courses. And then also I was thinking like Sunday school. A lot of times we would have the same teacher 2 years in a row.
Or even coaches. I mean, it's a little different, but
Yeah.
you had the same soccer coach for I think probably close to what, 7 years straight?
Yeah.
Okay, but what if you don't like it? What if you don't get along with the teacher or the teacher not nice to you or the coach is not nice to you? Then what
Well,
happens?
that was the argument, the American argument for why they don't do it. But
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 the study also showed that even the less experienced teacher, or like the poor, like the
right.
worst teacher, the child still performed better, it seemed, having that continuity.
Yeah, but the child themselves, if you're in a classroom, because I've had teachers that they didn't like me and so I didn't want to be in their class again. Matter of fact, I had a biology teacher in the 10th grade and he flunked me. And
Mhm.
then they gave him to me when I had to redo it, I had to have the same teacher. And he made some comment to me like, oh, how do you think you're going to do this time? Or some snarky remark. And so that was not a good situation for me.
Hmm.
So
Okay, so I guess that's the downside.
yeah. So,
I mean, Sharon, actually, what do you think about like they're talking in this book how the culture is just different in Finland? Like they're
yeah.
saying, this belief in all students, they invest in every student regardless of ability. Um, and then they also brought up
Yeah.
this idea that like the most respected career in the U.S. is a doctor, but in Finland it's actually a teacher.
Right. Yeah. So that helps also to why the kids do so well on their tests because they're they respect the teachers, and I forget the rest of the thing you said, but was a very good point.
All right,
Mhm.
so I was because we have I guess maybe when they were saying like in Finland like they want to invest in every student, wasn't that the purpose of No Child Left Behind? Like wasn't that like the same like floor plan or
Right. But
idea?
see, right, that was the idea, but it never worked because there are certain, a lot of schools do not get the kind of money that other schools do. They don't, lots of schools that are very poor get the very poor teachers. And plus they have they have teachers leave all the time. But that was the goal. But I don't know how that would necessarily work in the whole country. A big country like ours, and a heterogeneous,
Heterogeneous.
yes, country like ours. So I don't know. But
So
I
do you
do
think?
remember one time when I was teaching, there was a they put all these kids from the first they from the after they got out of the first grade, in the second grade they put the smart kids into a class with a woman, and then she had them again the next year, and they were used to walk around the school like they thought they owned the school. So,
Okay.
but I guess that was because there was only one teacher. If the whole school was like that, that would have been different. But
So do you think the issue?
the teacher also, I just have to say, the teacher also walked around like she was something. So anyways.
Okay.
So do you think the issue is that we're too, I guess, different across the board in America versus like in Finland where, the culture is very the same throughout? Like, do you think that is the main contributing factor why their system worked when I guess ours didn't?
I think that because I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but I know that it doesn't work here because there are so many different. I'm not sure. Okay, I can't answer that question. Okay.
All right.
That's fair. Yeah, because like in some ways, when they said like no, invest in every student regardless of ability, I feel like I feel like it's almost flip-flop. Like, and they say like the US like values like excellence, like early, like they want to identify excellence. But like in Europe, I get the sense like their sports, they're kind of trying to identify the excellence right away, but we're kind of the opposite, I guess, because I feel like we have more opportunity for sports for kids, but I could be totally off, but that's kind of it's
Oh,
kind of, it seems flip-flop to me.
well, in Great Britain, they're like when they're 13 or 14, everybody takes a test. And at that point, if you don't do well, then they send you to like a technical school and you don't have much chance to go to college. And the other kids are put in a different kind of classroom. So that's how the states are, that we're always looking for the excellence, and we don't really give people a chance.
Wait. I think what you just said shows that we do. Like, we don't do that. Everyone has the ability to go. I mean, you can argue the quality of the education, but everyone has to go to school here. You're not taken out of school to sent to trade schools if you don't want to.
That is true. That is true. But throughout the system itself, there are certain kids that, like when you get to high school, there's certain kids that are geared towards college, and there are other kids that, because they seem nobody the kids that are pushed to the technical schools, nobody really pushed them to be the best that they could be. Lots of times teachers will look to the best students instead of what this child is not doing that well. What can we do to make him be the best that he can be?
Okay, well, so I guess in comparing to the examples they gave in Finland, where the principal of the school was like, giving in the book, he gives an example where this Finnish principal is giving a personalized, uh, essentially language lessons to this Albanian student. Yeah, in that regard, I do agree. But I kind of feel like we go. I mean, maybe I'm just delusional because I feel like the public schools are kind of geared towards the least denominator.
That's true too, but even when they do that, Al, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to push the kids that are not doing that well, that they're going to push them in ways to make them encourage them and to make them decide that they can do things that they didn't think they could do. It's a lot of making you feel like, okay, I'm not doing well at this, but that doesn't mean it's anything about me. It means that maybe I need to do things, maybe I need to do things a different way. Maybe I need to try something that I don't think I can do, but that's not really encouraged. And that's
Okay,
just,
yeah, I think that is probably true. But I guess to what you just said about Great Britain, and I think this is also true of Germany, is that you take these exams that kind of dictate your
right,
career path.
yeah, right,
We don't. What I'm saying is we don't have that. Like
right.
you
We don't
can
have,
you can go even if you're a terrible high school student, you can probably still go to community college and then
mhm,
eventually transfer to
right,
college and
right,
really you're not put on a set path.
right,
You are
right.
able to do what your
This
heart
is, right,
desires.
this is literally in the system itself, that's what they do. So everybody knows when they get to be 13 or whatever the age is, that they have to take a test.
Right. So what I'm saying is our to me, that means our system is more open.
Yeah.
Like it is more to every child.
Hmm.
Those systems, I think, are more closed off. Those are more
Right,
elitist.
right. I do agree with that,
I
right.
I kind of also view it though as like more of a cultural thing, whereas in America, it's almost like we kind of believe it's more innate. Like we're looking for excellence like early. Like you either have the skill or you don't. Whereas I've got the sense in Finland, the underlying assumption is that actually the kid is capable. Like every student is capable to do it, and that's the assumption they're going off of. Whereas maybe the assumption here is a little different. And I think,
Okay,
and that
that
gets to the culture though.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I mean,
that
maybe
that
we
very
just
well
need
may be
to,
too.
I
Hmm.
mean, we could very easily just, push up the salaries for the teachers. Then maybe many more people would be competitive towards being a teacher, and then maybe that would do something.
Well, did they say something in there about in the Finnish system about teachers working together and teaching together? Or they didn't, that was not in there. Like,
If
Uh,
if
teaming
they
up
did,
to teach.
I missed. If they did, I
Okay,
missed
I
it.
wasn't
I
sure
don't
if they
remember
did.
that.
Okay, okay. But
um,
I mean, this is a really interesting book for people to read, to see how they can change their life and the life of people that they're affecting, like people that work with them or the people that work under them, or as being a boss or a teacher or even a student. There's different ways to look at how your life can go if you really want to do something.
mhm.
I will say, like, they sort of make this comment in Finland of how he makes just about population size. I think he makes the statement that in Finland, it's either the motto or someone said it, like, you can't waste any brain.
Mm.
So the emphasis could be switched because we have just so many more people, and they're so, I think by default, there are so many more just by numbers, there's so many more than qualified people that not sort of like what you were saying, Jack, not not spending effort on maybe unlocking everyone's potential we as a society don't need, where that may be necessary in Finland.
Right. Well, but they're also I'm always hearing people say there's so many children, so many minds that are lost because they're not getting the kind of things that help them develop.
Right. Yeah. That's
You know,
and I'm saying in Finland, like in our society where we view that individually as tragic, like the society as a whole won't really be affected that much. But maybe in like a smaller population sized country, if you're losing a lot of potential, it has bigger ramifications to the country as a whole.
I'm not sure about that.
It was just an idea. I don't know.
That I don't necessarily agree with, but
Okay,
if
I mean, I'm just thinking.
okay. I was just thinking a lot of things I say, so that's fine with me.
I don't know. You guys have anything else?
I mean the story about the eventual astronaut was pretty remarkable.
Mhm. That was,
Um,
yeah.
I got the sense that Adam Grant was kind of pushing people towards looking at the trend of past performance and, you know, the hurdles they've gotten over and the stumbling blocks. But I was kind of having trouble, like, practically, like, thinking about what we should do, like, instead of like GPA for like schools. Like, I don't know how, and there, he's kind of getting into this, like, grading someone's like hardship, and I don't really know if I like how that, like, comes off. Like, if you're, yeah, this kid was like, you know, grew up on a, you know, a farm, or like was a migrant worker, but, you know, this kid grew up like single mother, food stamps, and they're talking about getting extra points in your SAT for having certain hardships. And I don't know if I really like that either, because then maybe the people are trying to show that they're having hardships when maybe they're not even. And I don't know. I was having trouble wrapping my mind around, like, how to practically implement, like, viewing some of these past events.
Well, but see, I'm sure in Finland that there are children, many children that they have raised by single mothers, children that are poor, although they're not as poor as they are here. And somehow or other, one, because they're so small, but somehow or other, they're able to get the students to move on a path that is useful for them, that will show them that there's something to look forward to. That was just so I was just so intelligent that you can have nothing to say.
But like seriously, like, how do you, because he's basically saying we should be viewing people that have had like a dip and then like a trend up, maybe more so than someone that's just been like kind of cool and, like, you know, steady. And it almost, I get the sense that people that were just good from the get-go and have just stayed good are getting penalized under what he's proposing almost.
Yeah, but even if you're a person that's always just always done well and has had a good life and everything, they still probably suffer from boredom what they're doing, or
Sure.
not, or thinking that they should do something, that they'd like to do something that they haven't tried. I mean, you can still use those different things. They could be a businessman, or they could be a doctor, and what they really wanted to do was be a pianist. And so this is saying that, you may have not may not have done that well when you were playing the piano before or doing it now, but you should give yourself a chance to try it, work on it, even though it's hard. Mm-hmm. So life it's not necessarily just going to be a straight line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Trying to think.
I mean, I don't know, the hardship, I guess, just to your point, Jack, the hardship thing, I kind of think there should be some, definitely not on, SAT, like they discontinued it on the SAT. Like that was the next sentence in the book.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I don't know, you should be able to talk about it a little bit. And maybe there should be some, uh, some worth given to it, but he also talks about some of the problems with affirmative action in the schools, and there are books on it, on how sometimes it hurts everyone. And there's a book called Mismatched where a guy talks about how, affirmative action a lot of times will put students into universities where they're not ready for that level of academic rigor, and then they have a higher, dropout rate. That's like the main point. So I think that there's a lot to be, I kind of agree with you, where I think some credence should be given to it, but I don't think you should penalize the people that are doing well from the beginning.
Well, and don't forget though, in Finland, I'm sure that they start children in school very early, like 2, 3, 4, whatever. And I mean, and everybody has to go. I mean, that's the impression I got. So everybody has to go, so that even when you come from different situations, you're always in a school and you're always getting help. Okay, here we don't give help to children that are having problems. So they suffer, or they have to compete with people that have had help, or they're able to push, they are able to push themselves. So I think that having the schools be there for everybody, and when they're young, I think that helps.
What do you mean we don't give help to kids that are struggling?
Like when kids, like there are kids that'll come into kindergarten, for example, and they've never been in school before. Or there's kids that, and then there are other kids that have been in school like since they're 4 or 5. Then there are other kids that, I mean, not 4 or 5, but since maybe 2 or 3. And then there are other kids that their
You mean like
parents read to
preschool?
them all the time. What?
Like preschool?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And so then, and also there are parents that have the time to read to their kids, spend time with their kids, give them extra activities. Other kids, they have parents working, and they don't have the same opportunities to increase their knowledge. So that's why things are not equal. And then also in the schools, when I was teaching, if you had a problem like special needs or something, it wasn't necessary. You didn't necessarily find it when they were in first grade or second grade. Maybe they'd find it when they're in third or fourth grade, or they'd even say, well, it's not really that bad. And so therefore they weren't learning like they could. So that my point is that there's not support for a lot of kids. There's no way for them to learn that you can work on your problems. You can try it a different way. There are people that'll give you advice on how to get to a forward stand. So that's the difference.
Well, I mean, like I guess what you just talked about, like parental involvement, I think it's a cultural issue where I don't know what it is in Finland, but I would guess that there's a massive difference in like the different, you know, demographics here, if probably parental involvement. Mom and dad. I really like, just actually as I was reading this, I was thinking about how much because he talked about reading Harry Potter to his kids, like how much it really kind of shaped my life. I mean, how much time mom and dad spent reading with me, because then like I mean throughout essentially my entire life,
Right.
I've read a lot, and how that affected me, like just being a good student, I would say, because
Right.
I could read faster. So yeah,
Right.
I'm guessing there are a real lot of kids that don't have that. But that's not I don't see how a school system could I don't know if there's a good way that a school system could implement that.
What they did in
Well,
Finland. That's my point, is that they have
No,
schools.
what I'm saying is what I'm saying is maybe the culture in Finland is that all their parents are super involved in their lives.
or
That could,
or
I
or
doubt.
maybe there's just it could be. I mean, I think we actually talked about this, like the number of like the percentage of single mothers across different countries. I think it's very low in like Asian countries, but it's ticking up. But like here, I think Iceland was actually seeing an uptick too. I can't remember what book we read that showed that, but
Here,
maybe
here
Finland
it's
also has a
here it's relatively high. I mean, I can look it up right
yeah,
now.
right. So maybe it's more, and that comes back to like a cultural thing, like less importance of like the family unit. Um, but talking to I mean, when you were talking about the reading, I actually was thinking kind of, I mean, he mentioned it and how you want it to be like play, but like, well, I hated
Okay,
reading during school
so
because I like learning the Shakespeare and all this old stuff. I could not care less. Like
Right.
I despised reading like from, I don't know, 6th to 12th grade. I didn't really start reading till I was 27 years old.
Okay.
Till I
Because
like started reading stuff that I was like, oh, I can like read other stuff, like read, oh, this is actually kind of interesting. And now So maybe it's more, yeah, like implementing more reading for pleasure. I'm not
Right,
sure.
yes, right. Instead of giving you things that you absolutely have no interest in and making it that you have to do it, instead of giving you a choice of different kinds of books that you can learn things from and you can enjoy it.
Mhm.
He talks about that in this book as well, making kids slog through the classics versus just allowing them to choose whatever they want to read.
Yeah.
What are you saying? That he said, wait, he
He,
said they
he,
should
he
just read the classics or they
no, no,
shouldn't?
no, no. He brought up exactly what you just said. He
Yeah,
says it's a great
right.
Yeah.
tragedy that English classes force kids to read classic literature, which
Mhm.
is difficult to read and get through,
Right.
and no one
And not
really,
interesting. Right.
right, instead of allowing them to choose books that they want to read,
Right. That's it.
which,
Right. And
right.
I have to say one other thing about Finland, which is what we don't have here. That may be true that the parents spend more time with their kids reading, but that's because they have a very good um, system. They pay the parents, the mothers, especially maybe the fathers too, for staying home for a couple of years when their kids are little, so that the mother can be around more and have more time to spend with them. So that's the other thing we don't
How
have
do
here.
you know all this, Sharon? Did you go look all this up?
What? No, just
Yeah, we knew that. We went to Sweden.
I don't read.
That
I
was, well, Sweden's not Finland
wait,
last time
hold
I
on.
I
checked,
Wait,
Jack.
oh
I
wait,
know,
I have to
but
tell you
a
this.
lot of these European countries do the same. Austria has a similar
No,
system.
listen, listen to me. I don't read the things you read. That's true. But I've been reading like I read all the time, and so I, as you read these different things, then you learn these things that you wouldn't even think that you were going to learn. And so that's why, like maybe I read a book on somebody, a romance book taking place in Finland. And within that, they'll say, well, this is what happened to when I was in school. So that's how I learn a lot of stuff. I just don't read the stuff you read. Anyways, that's how
So yeah, what'd you find about single mothers?
what I found. Oh,
It looked like the rate was, I think, about 20% of households were single mothers in Finland.
Okay, is that lower than America?
Sorry, 24%. Let me look up America. I think that would probably be lower.
24% is lower than what we have, probably so. Because I remember when Richard and I went to Prague. Yeah, I think it was.
Mhm.
Yeah, we had a tour guide, and so she was saying that she was so upset because she was going to have to go back to work because her child was like 2 or 3, but she had been able to take off all the first couple of years of the child's life, and so
Mhm.
she could spend time with him and help him develop.
This is saying, I'm just doing a quick Google search. This is the 2010 census showed 27% of children live with one parent.
We're here
Okay.
2010. You're saying that was from
2010. That seems low from other statistics I've read.
right.
And then I like so the family unit thing struck me. I mean they also bring up how that there's like, top it was people raised in the top 1% of family incomes were like 10 times more likely to have an invention, and that also certain zip codes, so like the
Yeah.
concentration of where people are. So I also wonder if it's like a geographic thing with the US because we're just like so big, and a lot of the hubs are, certain cities for certain things. I kind of wonder if we were more dense, people would be more exposed. Because I get the
Maybe.
sense like if you go like when I go to Vienna, it seems like there's more mixing of like, lower socioeconomic class
Right.
with the higher. And they even like the kids on the low end have exposure to the more like well-off kids.
Well,
Um,
don't you think kids in New York have that or no?
right. I do. I would say,
Well,
yeah, they
certain
probably
kids
do.
in New York, but don't forget I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of very wealthy people in New York, or
Yeah.
they're trying to be wealthy. So they get a lot of ideas, things to do. But there's a lot of kids in New York City that are not getting exposed to that.
Mhm.
Right, but I guess to his point, there are probably a lot of kids in Vienna that also aren't getting exposed to that. The point is that you have more mixing versus like where we grew up.
Right.
So
No
like
mix.
I had in grad school, I had a girlfriend that grew up in New York, and she was talking to me about like working in, a lab at NYU, like in high school. And I'm like, man, there was no chance I could have worked at a tier one academic
Right.
lab in high school.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, it's like a way bigger advantage.
Hmm.
Um, but like right. So like that was because we were more like rural, I guess.
Right.
Mhm.
I don't
Hmm.
know if you would consider. I would say where we grew up is pretty rural.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. Yeah.
Because I hate to bring I'm going to bring up sports again, but there was a book about how when Germany got absolutely embarrassed at the 2006 World Cup, how they revamped their whole soccer
But
system.
it wasn't the 2006 World Cup.
Yeah, when they hosted.
They got they got like third. Talking about
No,
like the 90. No, you're talking about like the 98 World Cup, I think.
no, I'm not. The '06 World Cup when they hosted, they got embarrassed. So
They got embarrassed losing in the semifinal.
I don't
That's
think they
an Yeah, they lost to Italy. They lost to Italy. I remember this. They
I don't
lost 2-0 in extra time to Italy. Del Piero.
I think you're thinking of the Euro, aren't you?
No, I'm thinking of the 2006 World Cup.
Okay, well, in any event, whatever it was the World Cup they hosted, they were embarrassed. It doesn't matter what they finished, but I know because I read the story, I read the interviews. They were embarrassed, so they revamped the system.
It
So
was not the
basically,
2006 World Cup.
yeah,
They
yes, it
got
was.
third.
Whatever.
No, it wasn't. They got third.
They didn't win. They were
They got
embarrassed.
That's not
They,
getting embarrassed. How is
I,
getting third embarrassed?
Alex,
They
I,
then went on, Jack. The book is called Das Reboot, right?
yes, I
Right.
read
So
it.
they then went on to revamp their team in 2 years where they got the final in the 2008 Euro, right? And they lost to Spain. And they had all these other good results, and then they won the 2014 World Cup.
Alex, I'm just telling you, they as a nation, they were embarrassed. They how they performed in the
I
'06 World Cup. So just let me finish.
Yeah, I agree with you.
They installed these training centers across the whole country, and this could only be done in a country like small and compact like this, because there was no kid in Germany that lived more than like 15 miles from one of these training centers, and every kid had the option to train at one of these training centers individualized, like with an individual trainer. And they attributed that setup to them winning the World Cup in 2014. But I was just, yeah, going to the opportunity thing and the geography helping them in that case. Because it would be hard for us to do something like that where we give the opportunity, a kid that grows up in Montana or Wyoming the same opportunity as someone that grows up in, Miami or San
Right.
Diego.
Hmm. Right.
I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. I'm just saying it wasn't because of the 2006 World Cup.
I mean, they did host the '06 World Cup. Am I right on that at least?
You're right on that. That's
Okay, so
correct.
okay.
Maybe it
We're
was
gonna have
after that.
we're gonna have
Maybe
to
it was
edit this part
after
out,
that.
but
No,
Maybe it was after.
I just read the synopsis. It's the late 90s. Embarrassment in the late 90s, not 2006.
it was
Jack,
really it was the
just
'06
think
World
about it.
Cup.
You think
I
they could
am. I read the book.
you think they could reinvent their entire program such that they could build a World Cup winning team in 8 years?
Yes. You pick up the 15, 16, 17, 18-year olds. Yes, I do. In eight
Dog,
years, they'd be in their prime.
it's late 90s.
Yeah. Okay, Al, why don't you take us out?
Took us in, you take us out.
Okay. Please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you'd like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to this would be greatly appreciated. And lastly, if you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. For the original episodes, the OGs, please visit brothersonbooks.com. I'm Jack Allweil. With me, as always, is my brother, Alex Allweil. Al, it's been a great show. And Sharon, thanks for coming on again. And
I enjoy it.
I'm sure we'll have you on again.
Okay, good.
Wait, Jack, what are we doing next time?
Next time we are doing
That book
your,
on
I think it's your last,
My last pick of this one. Yeah.
The Stiglitz book,
yeah,
The Road to Freedom.
The Road to Freedom.
Joseph E. Stiglitz.
Right,
Economics in the Good Society.
right. Now,
Okay.
I'm reading a book now that I think that we should do. We're off, right?
No, we're
No, we're
not.
still on.
Yeah. Okay.